covering the High Plains with news, weather, and information. From TV 23 Studios in Sublette, this is High Plains Today.
Hi everybody, welcome to this special edition of High Plains Today. I'm talking with Julie Pinkerton. She is the Executive Director of Hospice of the Prairie, Prairie Home Health. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. All right, now today I want to discuss, we've talked about home health and what you guys do with that out of Dodge City and all kinds of stuff, but we've really never dealt into the hospice part of stuff. I mean, we know that in 1980, this all started with bereavement and grieving services as a volunteer organization, right?
Right.
And in 1991, Medicare came along and allowed you guys to add more professional staff. But so today I want to concentrate on the hospice part of it. So explain to me, give me the addition for dummies. What is hospice?
Hospice is a program designed for folks that no longer are seeking a cure for their illness. You might think of cancer as an example. And it is also available for folks that maybe have been battling a long-term chronic illness and they are tired of curative treatment for that illness. So they might call in hospice, and hospice is about helping people stay comfortable, have dignity, and the care that they need at the end months or years of their life. There is so much more to it than that, but that is the shortest version I can give you.
That's probably the only version I could probably understand. But, okay, so, I guess, you think of hospice, you think that, okay, well, they're just coming in to end your life for you. And that's not it at all, right?
Not at all.
Because that does go around, right?
It goes around, and that's why opportunities to talk to you, Chris, and be on the air is so important, because we really want to let the communities that we serve understand what hospice is. And first of all, hospice is never involved to hasten someone's death. It is always involved to help people be comfortable and really to let nature take its course.
Okay, so, and you're talking about, so if somebody decides, in their life and they've been going through doctors, hospital, home, and they're, say, getting on in years or whatever, and they're just saying, I'm done, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. That's when you guys step in?
That is a very common time.
Well, that's one case.
Exactly.
One case. Okay.
Very common time. And, there's certain illnesses on this earth that there's simply no cure for. And there comes a time in many people's lives where they are just done fighting it, not necessarily because they want to die tomorrow, just because they want to focus on quality of life. They've learned what a poor quality of life can mean, and they want to be enjoying the time that they have left.
Okay, so when you guys from Hospice of the Prairie come in, or somebody gets a hold of you and says, all right, I think we need your service, I don't know, but you can certainly tell them yes or no, I'm sure.
Right.
What are the first things that you guys do when you come into someone's home?
Well, if I might back that up just a little bit to say, when we get that phone call or that visit from a family member or a patient or a doctor's office, we're going to visit with the patient and their family first off, even if it's over the phone, to just learn a little bit more about what they're looking for. And then we always work under the direction of the patient's physician. So we always contact that doc and let them know that the family would like to visit with us. We'll go to the person's home and just sit down and chat. It's not about, we're here to sign you up for hospice. It's about, hey, let us tell you about some programs we have and see if that might be helpful. But most importantly, we would like the patient and their family to tell us, what do they feel like they need right now? What kind of support are they looking for? Hospice is not a one-size-fits-all kind of program, so it's really important that we have that one-on-one time with the patient and family to figure out what are their goals, what do they hope for.
So you kind of customize the program to fit the patient's needs. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So, because no two are going to be alike.
Right.
So you guys are able to do that.
Exactly. And that's one of the neatest things about hospice as compared to much of the rest of our healthcare system. Hospice is all about individualized care and figuring out what the patient wants and their family, because we really do serve the entire unit of patient and family and perhaps their friends, whoever's closely involved in their situation.
Okay, so in this service, and before we go to break, you can talk to them, I mean, because you have, I'm sure, chaplain services, as well as the nursing services and counseling
Yes.
as well.
Yes. And bath aides and volunteers.
Well, there's that word again, volunteers.
Great group. Yes.
Okay.
It's a whole
so
team.
what are the volunteers? I mean, how do they get involved and what do they do?
Sure. First of all of our volunteers are trained from Hospice of the Prairie's volunteer training program. We screen every volunteer, do reference checks, all that stuff. And then volunteers are assigned to serve patients and families. If the patient and family want that, the volunteers will make friendly visits. They will come and just hang out with the patient. They might go for a drive, see how the fall crops are coming along, if that's of interest to the patient. Perhaps the patient would like someone to take them to Dairy Queen for an ice cream. The volunteers do all kinds of things just to help improve the quality of life for the patient.
Wow.
They're very
Okay.
cool.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, stay right there. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to get into some of the other services that you provide, because we're talking about hospice care, but we need to talk about how this affects the loved ones of the patient too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and stick around. Julie and I'll be back with more right after this.
You're watching High Plains Today on TV 23 with host Chris Jewell. TV23's internet service and 4G live streaming provided by United Wireless. Coverage you deserve. Service you expect. United Wireless.
Welcome back. She is Julie Pinkerton. She is the Executive Director of Hospice of the Prairie, Prairie Home Health in Dodge City, and we're talking about hospice services. Now, before we went to break, I said we need to talk about what happens with the patient. I mean, we all think about, hospice is for the patient, but what about the family members or loved ones of that patient? I mean, how do you guys handle all that?
Right. The first thing is to remember that hospice is a team of people. Hospice is not one person. And we talked about, we have nurses, social workers, chaplains, volunteers, bath aides, the patient's physician. The hospice's medical director is a part of the team. It takes a group of people. So when we meet with a patient and a family and we outline their goals, they help us know what parts of that team they would most like to participate with right now. And so, for example, almost all of our patients would want a nurse on a regular basis. And so that nurse is the eyes and ears of the physician, because many times hospice patients are trying to use their energy for fun things. They might not necessarily want to go to the doctor's office or go to the lab to get their lab drawn. They can have hospice work on those things for them, thereby conserving their energy to go do fun things like perhaps a grandchild's ball game. Maybe they like to go to coffee every day at the Quick Trip, with their buddies. There's just a lot of things in life that people would prefer to spend their time on versus getting their health care. And hospice can make that happen at those end months and years of life.
Okay, so here's a big question. When people are sitting around and you have a terminal disease, or you're to the point where I'm 102 and I don't want to anymore, or whatever the case may be, when is the time to call hospice?
The time to call hospice is when a person or their family know that there is not an opportunity for a cure, or when the patient or family is they're tired of the emergency room runs. How do we know? Talking to one's physician is another good time to visit. Is hospice something I should look into right now?
Do most people call, though, when you get there and you go, you could have called us way sooner?
Yes, the most common thing we hear on our patient and family satisfaction surveys as we visit with folks is, I sure wish I would have called you sooner. I think, Chris, one of the key things about how do I know when to call hospice, this is part of the answer. The idea that many in our society have that hospice is made for the last hours or day before death, that is wrong. It's just a myth. Hospice is designed for many, many months prior to the very end. And if that alone is the only message we share through this time together, that's very important. Because if people can understand that calling hospice, frankly, is not a death sentence, rather it is a life. It is an opportunity for life and to enjoy life to their very fullest.
In the time you have left.
Call. Exactly. So if you're suffering from an illness, things are tough on your family, that's a good time to call. When you go to the oncologist and the oncologist says, we don't have more treatment to cure your illness, that is the time to call. We serve patients on hospice for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. That
Really?
is fine and good. That is what Medicare intended when they created the Medicare hospice benefit. Medicare did not intend for hospice to be care at the very, very end of life. It's for months and even a year or two.
So, yeah, because you have no problem. I mean, I'm guessing you get a lot of calls where people have maybe 2 weeks or a week left.
Yes.
And that's when you guys have to come in, and then you have to probably expedite everything that you want to do, right?
We sure do. And we miss out on the opportunity to give the patient and their family the best of quality of care, quality of life, to be able to enjoy the life that they have available to them. And that is really what hospice is all about. You mentioned earlier, how do we help the families? We support them too, because so many times we find that patients and families are busy protecting each other. You know, they're afraid to talk about what's really happening for fear that the other party is just going to take it poorly. And with hospice's objective help, we can often bring families together so that there's more honesty, more truth-telling. And once again, when those hard things are more handled, if you will, it gives patients and families the energy to do the fun stuff, the good stuff, the things that matter to them.
Okay, so then that is the big thing I've learned. It doesn't matter. You said 2 years. You can call
Yes.
hospice up to 2 years
Yes.
or 6 months, a year, whatever. It's not a last minute deal.
Right.
Doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be, and you bet we will do it. If it is a last minute deal, we
Sure.
do that, and that's fine, but it's not the best of hospice. You know, Medicare has very clear rules on who can access hospice and who can't. We are always careful to follow those rules, and those rules do allow people to be on hospice for longer periods of time than what most people in the community think.
Okay. All right. Stay right there. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, though, I want to talk about some of the services of how you help, say, the family members, and especially children. Because, I mean, a lot of people don't think about that either, right?
Right.
Okay. So stick around. Where are we at? Here we are. Julie and I'll be back with more right after this. And welcome back. Julie Pinkerton, Executive Director, Hospice of the Prairie, Prairie Home Health. We're talking about hospice care today on this special edition. All right, so last we left off is, we were talking about hospice care and when to call hospice and what you guys can do. Let's talk a little bit about the grieving services now and how you guys can help the family, because once the patient passes, you're left with the family and the loved ones, and they're all probably going, okay, now what?
Absolutely. Grief services are just as important to a hospice program as any other part of the program. And at Hospice of the Prairie, our grief services are tailored to both adults and children. What happens is the hospice counselors contact the family after the death of their loved one and visit about the different services that are available through our program. I also want to be sure that the communities we serve know our grief services are available to everyone in the community, regardless of whether their loved one that has died was served by hospice or not. That's very important.
Really?
Yes. At no
Okay.
charge as
See,
well.
I didn't know that.
2015, for example, we served over 200 what we would consider community bereaved, folks that had lost a loved one to death, and we did not serve their loved one in the hospice program. So it's a big program. And we have a variety of services to try to meet the different needs that people might have. And let me say too, Chris, not everyone wants to have grief support services. And of course, that's fine. We don't think everyone should. Our goal is to have the services ready when people do feel that they need extra support.
Okay, so again, it's kind of like when you are setting up what kind of services you're going to provide the patient, you can kind of customize a program for whatever also in the grieving part, right?
That's exactly how it goes. It's how it works. The counselor visits with the patient, or excuse me, with the families, and they tell us what parts they want to participate in. The other thing that's important to note is that for a lot of folks, they're not interested in grief services for months or maybe even years after the death of their loved one. That's really normal, and so I think that's a good message to share.
Really?
Yes, 6 to 12 months later, someone might call and say, you know, I thought I was doing fine since my husband has died. I'm not doing fine.
Okay.
Can you all help me? And that's
right.
perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine.
Wow, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
and children, I'm sure, I mean, you know, as you do this, I mean, is it harder on children? Is it harder on adults? I suppose it's
I think
ranges both ways, doesn't it?
one of the things that we've learned at Hospice of the Prairie is that children can often be the forgotten grievers. I couldn't tell you if it's harder to be a grieving child or a grieving adult, but what I can tell you is that children are grieving when they lose someone close to them to death. And so an enormous part of Hospice of the Prairie's Grief Services program is serving the children. We do that in a variety of ways, one-on-one counseling, of course, and we're always going to involve parents or guardians in the process as well. We have some really interesting children's grief groups that go on, and they happen most often in the school systems. The school systems and the communities that we serve have come to know us, and the counselors within the school will identify children that have had a loss. They will contact our grief coordinator, and they will put together a program just for those kids. And it's really neat. The school districts even let us come during the school day. They'll find a certain time where those affected students can gather with our grief counselor, and they do some very special kid-driven activities. They play, they do arts and crafts, but they learn about grief. And Chris, that's something those children will keep with them for a lifetime.
So, okay, so, you know, and we've had all around the area, you know, high school students or whatever, or elementary students have died from cancer or an automobile accident or something like that. Are you guys available for services in a community when something like that happens?
Yes, we are, and
Wow.
we do it quite often. It's part of our mission. As a not-for-profit hospice, we're just committed to giving back to the community. And so what often happens in those circumstances, the school, or if it's a business that has had a tragedy, will reach out to us and ask if we can provide some extra counselors. Again, it's something we do regularly. We know how to do it. We know how to respond quickly. And it's a privilege to help. And we're glad we were able to do that.
Because you have chaplains and counselors and nurses and social workers and all these people on staff or volunteers, right?
Right. And when we're called in for grief services, whether that's into a tragic situation within the school system or something like that, we're sending our chaplains and our social workers. We only send our licensed qualified staff into those situations to be able to provide the best possible care to the students and the faculty in that school system.
You know what? You guys do a lot. I did not realize that hospice encompassed everything like that. And the biggest thing I'm taking away from this today is don't wait so long if you're in a hospice situation to call hospice.
Exactly.
And you guys pretty much service Southwest Kansas,
Right.
about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from Dodge City. If you draw a big circle on the map,
Yep.
they'll find you.
Yes, and grief services, same thing. If you or someone you care about is struggling after the loss of a loved one, or maybe it's not even called struggling. Maybe they're just sad and they'd like to have someone to visit with. That's a good time to call Hospice of the Prairie. We do our grief groups in many different communities. They're not all based in Dodge. And based on the need in the community, we will move a group to that location. We also have folks that travel to our groups from all over Western Kansas just to have access to a solid support group. So there's just a lot of opportunity for folks to get help, and our goal is that people can be as healthy both physically and mentally as possible through what is a natural part of life, and that is dying and losing people to death.
All right, Julie, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I learned something today. All right, and thanks for tuning in to the special edition. We'll see you next time.
Keep up to date with the latest information from TV 23 on our Facebook page, KDGL TV.